This is Planning Analytics Workspace, which is the web front end for IBM Planning Analytics. And there's also an Excel user interface called Planning Analytics for Excel. But for the demo, I'm just going to focus on the web. And with this, you get these 4 tiles at the top, which represent the 4 capabilities that you get as standard, allowing you to build and work with business plans and create and interact with reports. Within our Fast Financial solution, there are 5 pre-built applications. The first one is for period end processing and consolidation of actual financial data, and the next 3 are related to planning of your P&L, balance sheet and cash flow, and the last one here is where administration is done, such as maintaining accounts and company hierarchies. So let's start off with period end close. The system is set up as workflow that guides both local finance users and group finance users through the period end process. The local finance team follow the first 4 steps, and group finance follow the latter 2 steps. And the first stage is loading trial balance data from source systems. This is broken into 2 steps. Whereby the data is validated by the system before it is actually imported into the database. I'm showing data being loaded from a file, but it can also be done via a direct feed from your source systems. In the next step, journals can be input if required to adjust the numbers, maybe to align with the group view or to make late adjustments that for whatever reason are not in the source system. The next step, step 3, is the intercompany process. So this allows us to analyse balances between group companies and ensure they match between different counterparties. This allows the system to perform an automatic intercompany elimination. Step 4 is the automation of generating cash flow statements. Users can enter supplementary data here that might not be part of the trial balance but is needed to generate a reconciling cash flow. At each stage, the local finance team can click submit to notify group finance that they have finished. Group finance would have access to this step, step 5 consolidated view, which the local users would not. And within that, they would go in here to review the intercompany balances and post the eliminations, and they can post any journals that they need to go in at a group level. And in here they can review the consolidated numbers across the group and sign them off. And the last section is for finalising a board pack, such as adding commentary and the distribution of management reports to the wider business. Okay, so on to importing trial balance data. Now this summary page shows the reporting status of all the companies in the group. This shows that everyone has completed their submissions apart from Ireland, who haven't loaded their data yet, and Norway, who haven't yet got a reconciling cash flow, which is out by the amount on the right. Now I have admin access, so I can see all the companies and divisions in the whole group, but security settings would limit this to just the companies a user is responsible for. And that applies not just on this page but across the whole application. So I'm going to take you through the process on behalf of these 2 businesses to complete the period end for the full group. First I'm going to load the trial balance for Ireland. Now this is the file that I'm going to import. On here we have, if I go through what the columns are, the period we're loading for, the company, and this is the local account according to Ireland's local chart of accounts. And then we have 4 optional columns. So if you don't need them, you can leave them blank as I have done. And if you need more, you can add more. It's all configurable. They relate to pre-built dimensions in the system that allow you to have more analysis. This is the file that I'm loading, and this will be saved into a location that's only accessible to the company that I'm logged in as. And here is where you select the company that you're wanting to load the data for. So the first step is to validate the file. And this is the view of that same file. We have the local account code and description that's contained in the file, and then here is the group account code and description, and that mapping has happened automatically from the local to group mappings tab. If there was, say, a new account this month which wasn't included in the mapping, then we would see an error here, but all the accounts are mapped in this file. But if there were missing mappings, then I could go into the local to group mappings page and add any new accounts at the bottom here, as well as any group account it maps to. And I can do that for accounts, cost centers, products and customers. One of the other validation steps to ensure that the file adds up to 0. The system ensures all the way through that you always have balancing debits and credits. I can see no validation problems here, no errors, so I can import the file. We can import monthly movements as we're doing here, or year-to-date values. And there we go, the numbers are loaded. So that's just for one company. But if I go back to the home screen, there are lots of companies and business units in the group. In the demo here, we expect one set of numbers to be submitted by each company, but it doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes it might be that just one person submits data for all the business units, and that can be done in a single file or several files, or a single data load or several data loads. But it might be a bit of a mix. You can set this up to suit the way you collect your financial information. Okay, now to look at the loaded results. This is for all companies, but I can filter just to look at Ireland. And here are the numbers that I've just uploaded. So this is really just a review step so that I can check the numbers are what I expect to see. Right, so let's move on to the next step, which is to enter any journals. Now the numbers I've just loaded match to my source system, but in here I can create journals which allows me to make adjustments over the top of the source numbers, maybe to align with group requirements, different accounting treatments, or make those late adjustments that maybe for whatever reason have not found their way into the source system. When I create a journal, I pick company, period and journal type. Now here we have some out-of-the-box journal types, but this is completely configurable to whatever you need. I'll cancel out of this so you don't have to watch me input numbers. If I go to unposted journals, there's one here that's kind of half done. And this one relates to the rent accrual. And when I'm happy, I'm going to click post. So now that's posted, I can click on the balance sheet tab and see where my journal has gone. It went into the local adjustment column, which I selected as my journal type. But what are all these other columns? The first one, called local base, is the trial balance data I loaded from file. So this always matches to the data in the source system. Local adjustment is an aggregation of all the journals entered into this layer, and these together add up to the local total. And then after that we have different journal types that enable us to clearly see all the adjustments that have been layered on top of the original source data, adding up to a group total. Now the columns to the left of the group total are in accounting signage, with credits shown as negative, but to the right we have the same columns repeated, but they are in reporting signage. Now if I wanted to see the detail behind these numbers to see what makes them up, then I can drill through and it will show me for that particular month all the transactions that make up that number, as well as any commentary which helps to explain what the adjustments are. Okay, that is journals. Now on to intercompany. This module is where the intercompany balances are managed. The first page here shows me all the counter companies that either I have balances with or are saying they have balances with me, and what the differences are. This is just Ireland and they only have one intercompany balance. So I'm going to select another company, Europe Holdings, because they have a lot more balances with other companies in the group. On this next tab, this is where I can enter new balances with counterparties. So I select the account and my company, and then I can enter balances in my local currency. So this is the counter amount. That's the balance that the counter company has recorded that they hold with me. They've entered it in their local currency, but it's translated here into my local currency. On the right is an excerpt from my TB, showing the balances held on the intercompany GL accounts. And the detail I have on the left must reconcile back to that. If I was looking at this from a group view, then on the last page I can see all the intercompany balances. On the right shows how the balances are between companies, and on the left how they reconcile back to the GL accounts. So I have an overview of where any differences are. Right, so let's move on to how we generate a cash flow. Here I have an at-a-glance dashboard of my cash, and on the bottom right there's a cash flow statement at a very high level. On the next page is the same cash flow expanded out more. Most of these lines come directly from the trial balance that's been loaded, and along with any journal adjustments. For example, the profit and loss from operations flows dynamically through from the P&L. But of course, other lines in a cash flow are often not available directly from a trial balance. For example, fixed asset additions. And that additional information is collected on the series of tabs along the top right. And these can be adapted and configured to suit whatever information and supplements that are supplementary to the trial balance that you need to collect in order to generate a cash flow. Now the sum of all these lines on the cash flow adds up to a net cash calculated total, and that should match the total of the cash accounts on my TB. And the next tab highlights whether it does or doesn't reconcile. I can see here that all the business unit cash flows reconcile except for Norway. They have a difference between their calculated cash flow and the balance shown on the cash accounts in their trial balance. And that's because they haven't completed their supplementary information, and this page shows the differences at a detailed level. And I can see that the problem relates to motor vehicles and profit or loss on disposals. Both these things relate to tangible assets. So let's go on to that tab and update it. It looks like some information has been filled in already, but not all of it. So I'm going to finish that off. This grid on the bottom right represents the same information that we saw previously, the cash flow reconciliation differences, but this time narrowed down to just my company and just for tangible assets. And this is going to help me complete the supplementary input. So here is the balance on my motor vehicles cost line in the balance sheet. And up here is my motor vehicle cost opening balance. That's last period's balance. Now the cash flow statement is of course interested in the movement in the period. So I need to enter the additions and disposals that get me from my opening balance to my closing balance. And this calculated closing balance must equal the closing balance in my TB. And of course at the moment it doesn't, because I need to enter the movements, which will then be picked up by the cash flow statement. Now I know that I had additions of 100,000 and my disposals were 96745. So now I have a new calculated closing balance that matches to the number on my balance sheet. The only thing I have left that doesn't reconcile is my profit or loss on disposal of fixed assets. So I'll fill that in with the proceeds of the sale, and then everything will reconcile. So if I go back to my Reconcile Supplementary Info page, all of my differences, hopefully, have gone away. And so has the difference between my net calculated cash and the cash on my TB. And you can see here that the cash flow has been updated with the additions here of 100,000. So as soon as I enter the data, my cash flow updates. And here I can see how my completed cash flow statement looks like, but in a nice reporting format. Okay, so as a local business unit, business finance user, I'm done. I can click submit, and that will indicate to the group finance team that I'm finished. So I'm going to move on now to the role of a group finance user. As a group finance person, I will be posting my intercompany eliminations, posting any group journals, and reviewing the consolidated results. On the intercompany reconciliation, I can review from a group perspective whether all the intercompany balances agree at summary and at a detailed level, similar to what we saw when we went through the intercompany process for one company. If I'm happy with that, then I can click post. And this will post the entries to eliminate the intercompany balances at all the group levels. If I go onto the balance sheet, you can see the intercompany elimination has been posted into its own journal layer. So that's intercompany done. Now on to my other group adjustments. Now I've got just one group journal left to post for investment elimination. And I've just picked that up there from unposted journals, and it's going to go to the group adjustment layer. So that's now completed my investment elimination. So I've done my bit as a group finance person, and when all the companies have submitted, these numbers are all automatically aggregated through the group hierarchy right up to the top of the group. So there's no need to run a process or a routine to add all the numbers together. It's updated instantly. So to review the consolidated results, I can look at this dashboard summary. And this shows me the P&L, balance sheet and cash flow for the whole group, as well as the divisions. And I can look at that at a more detailed level in these subsequent tabs here. And I can drill down to company level. So from here I can review and investigate and sign off the numbers. So the last step is to review the reports in the board pack and enter any commentary, but that step is closed for now until we've updated our forecast. So that's what I'm going to do next, and then we'll return back to the reports. So I'm going to go back to the home page, and we're now on to the next application, the P&L plan. The P&L plan is divided into sections, including gross margin, which is done by sales, quantity and price. But I've also got an overhead section and a section for other P&L lines that include things like depreciation, tax, interest. Now these sections can be customised or more added to cover what you need that might be unique to your business or your industry. Here on the sales, my actual months are populated, but I need to complete the forecast months. And one way to do that is to use the AI forecasting, which uses the historical pattern to automatically predict the pattern of the future sales. So the dotted line here is what it is predicting as most likely, and it's 90% certain that it will fall within the blue shaded area. So if I'm happy with the predicted results, I can use this to populate my forecast. Some people actually use this to qualify the plans that have been submitted to see if they fall within the computer generated expectation. Okay, right, on to overheads. And in here we're going to update the numbers. Now I can just overtype a number. Or I can do some kind of calculation. If I want to undo that last change, then I can roll back the data entry. Okay, so that's just in one particular scenario. But if I want, I can simulate a number of different scenarios before settling on one. And that's when we work with something called sandboxes. So I can create a sandbox, and I'm creating scenario 1 based on the original baseline scenario. And having created it, I can now select it. So I can do more than just update individual cells, of course. So for example, I know that IT costs by the end of the year will be 1 million. So I can just type that into the total, and it breaks back the 1 million, increasing all of my future months proportionally to what was already there. But there's other data spreading profiles as well to help with modelling. So for travel and entertainment, for example, on this right click here, we have all these profiles here. I'm going to select the straight line method. And this is going to start here at 7,500 and gradually increase to 75,000 by the end of the year. But I know it could go one of two ways, so I'm going to create another scenario and base it off of scenario 1. And then I need to select that, scenario 2. So it looks just like scenario 1. But this time I'm going to use another method to model the T&E costs. So I'm going to go for a growth percentage method, and I'll start at 7,500 again. It's increasing it now by 10% month on month. And now I'm going to compare scenario 1 and scenario 2 to look at the overall difference in overheads. So I need to drag the sandboxes onto the columns and then filter for the whole year. And I'll make sure I've picked base and scenario 1 and scenario 2 so that we can see them here side by side. So now I can quickly make a calculation to compare scenario 1 and scenario 2. And we can see here that there's a difference of 269,000. So I can then pick whichever scenario I prefer and commit it to the main plan, which will update the base scenario. Now, of course, this is a really simple example of a plan, but the calculations can be as complex as you need them to be. You could have calculations, for example, for overhead allocations, prior year growth percentages, inflationary increases and so on. Or you could even drive some of the lines, say such as salaries and wages, from its own staffing planning model behind the scenes. So it's extendable to customize the model to your requirements and just add more to it. Now that we've updated the P&L plan, because the balance sheet and cash flow plans are dynamically connected, they are also automatically updated by the changes to the P&L plan. So for example, the data we input will have changed the profit number, which will have driven a change to the net cash from operating activities line in my cash flow plan. That in turn has driven a new net cash total, and that total from the cash flow plan will have dynamically updated the cash forecast line in my balance sheet plan. So your P&L, balance sheet and cash flow are all fully integrated and always in line. In the administration module, you can publish multiple drafts of your plan submission and compare how those drafts differ at a summarised or detailed level. And once the final draft is signed off, you can publish the final copy of the plan to be used in reporting like your board pack or any of the dashboards. Now, speaking of that, we're now going to assume the plan is done, and I'll show you the reporting. So here we have an example of a dashboard which summarises the main headlines of the business. Now the great thing about this is it's interactive. So I can drill down on the charts, for example. So I'm drilling down on one of the Megabeats divisions, and it shows me all the business units within that division that made up that one number. And you can also filter the dashboard for different companies or time periods. The data on here can come from all sorts of different source systems or even spreadsheets. Most of the figures here are derived from the general ledger that we've just processed and adjusted, but the graph in the bottom left is from sales invoicing data, which comes from a completely different source, but the filters at the top work over both sets of data at once. And don't forget, user security applies everywhere, so users will only see the companies that they are allowed to access. Now, as well as basic charts, there are all sorts of other popular charts and visualizations such as waterfall charts. And I also really like the bullet charts on the bottom right because they're really good at showing a visual representation of how close you are to target. And of course, this is just the out-of-the-box dashboard to get you started. Any of the dashboards can easily be adapted to suit your needs, or you can even build new ones from scratch. It's a very simple tool to build reports like this. It's mainly drag and drop, slice and dice, and it's a very accessible tool for non-technical people to use. So let's move on to the board pack. Now, of course, traditionally board packs are in Excel, PDF or PowerPoint. So what would a board pack look like in Planning Analytics workspace? Well, one of the benefits is that as soon as new actuals or new planning data is updated, all of the reports and charts immediately reflect the new position. So there's no need to recompile the pack again. All you need to do is update the commentary. Secondly, the information is all interactive. The fact that I can filter the charts rather than look at static ones means that I can get more analysis just when I might need it, rather than have tons of detail that I have to wade through. It's not all about visualization, so of course you still need a P&L, balance sheet and a cash flow statement. And this P&L was actually created and formatted in the Excel user interface and then dragged onto the web page. Commentary can even be stored in the database on a line-by-line basis. So here it's telling me that sales have increased due to 3 new stores in Ireland, and I can drill in and see more detail about those 3 stores. And this note tells me where they're located, so it allows us to store notes to provide context behind the numbers, and it records a history of all the commentary that's been stored. Okay, so that's the end of my demonstration. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I didn't go too fast. I think I did go quite fast, but there was a lot to show you. Don't forget that what I've shown you here is our out-of-the-box solution, which can quickly get you started with financial reporting and planning. After that, there's so much more that planning analytics can do to transform business decision making beyond finance.